So there was this one time when my grandpa had just gotten a Netflix account and he was really excited to get into streaming and he asked me for suggestions on what to watch. And I was like, oh my god, you should watch Black Mirror. It's a horror anthology series. You would love it because he loved Twilight Zone. And in my brain, I'm like, this is perfect. This is a perfect fit. I forgot what the first chronological episode of Black Mirror is on Netflix. It's the episode where the British Prime Minister fucks the pig. And so he watched that episode and then called me and was like, Kayla, what the fuck is this? Why did you recommend that I watch this show? I think about that a lot. I have always been fascinated by the success and long-lasting popularity of Black Mirror. If you're unfamiliar, the show is a sci-fi horror anthology series that started on Channel 4 back in the UK in 2011. It mostly has themes about technology and the impact it can have on our lives in the most extreme of situations. The show reads almost like a Twilight Zone with a very specific dystopian motif throughout. It's worth noting here that the series was purchased by Netflix a few seasons in, and when it comes to most Netflix shows, all of the episodes drop at one time, people talk about it for like a day, and then the cycle repeats. Black Mirror always felt a little different though, like despite its short seasons and one-day drops, it seemed to have a bit more of a lasting impact. Maybe not in terms of immediate conversations, but definitely in aspects of online meme culture and long-term pop culture iconography. I mean, most people have a favorite Black Mirror episode, mine is White Bear if you're curious. Over the show's run, I have had mostly praise for it, although I will say that toward the later seasons it did get a little bit blockbustery with Rachel, Jack, and Ashley 2, an episode that featured Miley Cyrus. While it was entertaining and kind of fun, it definitely lost a lot of that existential, surreal feel that Black Mirror was originally known for. But as for the rest of the series, well, I enjoy it every time it comes around. I like that they use mostly unknown actors, I like how every episode is obviously its own self-contained story, and that they really play up the aspects of dystopian horror in really creative ways. Not every episode is a hit for me, but they have more hits than misses, and consistency is something that I can always appreciate. And I'll be honest, after Bandersnatch, I didn't think this show was ever coming back. Bandersnatch deserves its own video, honestly. If you don't remember, it was an interactive movie that I think was a little too ambitious and before its time, but still a creative idea nonetheless. After Bandersnatch, the show had a brief 3-episode season with the aforementioned Miley episode back in 2019, and like many things in 2019, including my happiness and sanity, it disappeared. But not in a vague, shrouded in mystery way. The showrunner Charlie Brooker was actually very transparent about the reason for the show's hiatus, saying in an interview in 2020 that he didn't know, quote, what stomach there would be for societies falling apart. A cheeky reference to the chaos of that particular time period. Which, in context, that seems sort of like a cute one-off joke, but at the time, it did actually seem true. If you've been living in a state of daze and confusion about where the last 3 years have gone, you may not realize that the world wasn't always like this. I really mean that, too. Things are getting dumber, people are getting crazier, and it's obviously because of the internet. I mean, it doesn't take a fucking genius to figure that out. And I'm not saying that Black Mirror is a sacred predictive text or anything. It's obviously just a series with a showrunner that is very in tune to satire, and that arrangement has to produce some correct guesses some of the time as technology continues to naturally become more dystopian. But when you look at crazy shit like this, or this, or this, it is worth asking the question, do we really need a show like Black Mirror anymore? Is reality really too depressing and insane to parody, or is there more here? I watched all 5 episodes in the newest season that dropped yesterday to find out. Cutting it again because I forgot to record this in the script because I'm an idiot. I will be doing spoilers for all 5 episodes. Everything is timestamped below by the episode's title, so if you haven't watched all of them, you can skip around to what you haven't watched. Just wanted to say that there will be spoilers. Proceed with caution. Okay, this might be a personal preference thing, but the first episode, Joan is Awful, is sort of like all of the parts of Black Mirror that I don't like wrapped into one package. Again, I'm seeing a lot of praise for this episode, so maybe it's just a me thing, but I think Black Mirror is almost at its best when it's so far removed from reality that whatever commentary the episode is making is naturally a lot more subtle and less on the nose, and this one almost just felt too in it, if that makes sense. The episode is a direct commentary on the rise of AI and algorithms and streaming preferences, and it just was a little too direct for me, especially because I feel like every season of the show has sort of a flagship episode that sets the tone for the rest of them, and they want it to be this. The plot of this episode follows Joan, a mid-level executive at an ambiguous tech company who does some objectively shitty things. She fires a young coworker and then kisses her ex-boyfriend while being engaged to her fiance. After these events happen, we see Joan and her fiance Krish browsing Streamberry, which is obviously meant to be a parody of Netflix. They stumble upon a show called Joan is Awful, where a woman who looks like Joan is being played by Salma Hayek. They start watching the show and realize that it's a recreation of the events we saw in the first few scenes. We then learn that Joan signed away the rights of her likeness to Streamberry when she signed the terms and conditions to join the service. When this plot point was revealed, a lot of interest was suddenly lost for me. I literally went, "That's fucking stupid," out loud, but I guess that's, the point. We also learned that Salma Hayek isn't really Salma Hayek. The show that everyone is watching is able to be developed so quickly in real time because it's essentially a complex CGI computer that uses Hayek's image, which she signed away in a contract herself. It reminds me a lot of that AI Seinfeld production that got shut down because the robot turned transphobic.
I'm thinking about doing a bit about how being transgender is actually a mental illness.
Then after some more shenanigans, real Salma Hayek and Joan team up to go to Streamberry and take down this computer. I was a little checked out at this point. Like I said, it was a little too on the nose for me, but it does get a bit more interesting when you realize that it's essentially a layers upon layers situation. Joan isn't really Joan. She's a fictive Joan being played by literally Annie Murphy. It's all really confusing. I'm sure someone can explain it better than me, but it's sort of this meta infinite time loop of infinite content being created from source Joan's life using the likeness of other famous people. To stop the loop, Annie Murphy Joan breaks the computer, crashing the layers of reality that have been built up on top of themselves. And then we see real Joan at the end, setting things right in her life and even sharing a coffee with Murphy at her own little coffee shop. I like aspects of this. I think all of the major plot reveals were a little too chaotic to sort of be shoved into the end like that. And I'm not the type to do plot point nitpicks. I am more than willing to suspend my disbelief in most cases, especially for something like Black Mirror, but they sort of break their own logic at multiple points, and it's really difficult for me to ignore. When Salma and Joan are coming up with this plan to infiltrate Streamberry, it should be known that this is what's going on if the computer is actively picking it up. It also doesn't make sense that the computer can replicate everything when there's no camera. They say it's just because Joan's phone is listening to her, so why doesn't she, destroy her phone then? I think the idea was there, but the concept was rushed and the gaps were filled in to get to this twist ending, which is the part of the episode I really like the most. Also, Netflix is giving itself way too much credit here. Shows don't become an overnight sensation anymore when they're brand new. If Joan is Awful dropped on Netflix, nobody would be talking about it the next day in the way that everyone in this episode was. I just think that's kind of funny. This was not my favorite episode. I was really worried that the whole season was going to be like this, but thankfully I was wrong. Loch Henry is my favorite episode of the season. This one actually has elements of Black Mirror that I like the best. It's similar to Shut Up and Dance or White Bear in terms of the tone. The plot of this episode follows two film students, Davis and Pia, as they return to Davis's hometown to make a nature documentary, staying in the home of Janet, Davis's mom. While in town, they learn that Loch Henry, a once popular quaint tourist destination in Scotland, has been all but abandoned due to a serial killer named Ian Adair that was active years prior, who became infamous for capturing and torturing vacationers. At the time, it's established that Davis's dad was killed in an altercation with him. Pia insists that she and Davis do a documentary on this subject instead, much to Davis's reluctance. As they're making the documentary, Pia learns that what she's known about Davis's parents isn't actually the truth. In fact, they aided Adair in the torture and murders of tourists and kept snuff films of the incidents in their house disguised as regular VCR tapes. Once Pia learns about this, she tries to escape Janet, but suffers from a fatal fall as she crosses into a rocky riverbank. Janet, assuming Pia actually escaped with the information, takes her own life and leaves the VCR tapes for Davis to find. We get a flash forward in time where Davis does actually go through with creating a documentary, and we get the sequence that reminded me a lot of the Barry finale actually, where we see a trailer for the film, and we learn that Davis did go public with the story about his parents and all of the content she left him after her death. The film wins a BAFTA award, everyone in town is cheering because they think it'll bring publicity back to the community, and we get some fun commentary from executives at Streamberry who want to turn the documentary into a live-action series, which is very clearly a swipe at Dahmer, and obviously I appreciate the amount of balls that it takes for the show to be that pointed, even though I do think the Streamberry continuity stuff does cheapen the tone of it a little bit. Overall, I loved this episode. I thought it was well acted. It really drove home some interesting themes about the ethics of true crime content and trauma as something to be consumed. The whole thing was well paced, well acted, and it was a twist I legitimately did not see coming. I also think the fact that it was so simple and very self-contained really lent itself well to the best of Black Mirror's whole premise. Loved it. I thought this one was great. I could also be biased though, because this is a topic that I'm really interested in. The psychological fanfare behind true crime really fascinates me as a journalist. It's a topic that I'm very passionate about, and it's a topic that I've actually discussed on this channel, so maybe it's my own interest in seeing this portrayed in media that is kind of blinding me in this situation, but definitely let me know how you felt about this episode in particular. I'd love to hear other opinions on it. Beyond the Sea is a mixed bag for me. The episode is a slow burn, so if you like quicker paced things, this is probably not the one for you. This episode is set in the 60s, where two astronauts, Cliff and David, are 2 years into a 6-year space mission. They can visit their home world via replicas, mechanical copies of themselves who are back on Earth, spending time with their wives and children. David's family gets murdered by a cult, I guess, who is mad about the replicas just for existing, and he goes into a deep depression, which makes it difficult for Cliff to work with him on this mission up in space. So Cliff offers David a chance to go to Earth using his replica to clear his mind and help him process his grief. During this process, David as Cliff becomes sexually attracted and then infatuated with Cliff's wife Lana, and begins invading all kinds of boundaries in Cliff's body. Cliff in space finds out about this and causes a conflict between the two men, forbidding David from using his replica to go back down to Earth, even though he says he really wants to apologize to Lana for the whole situation himself. When Cliff leaves the vessel to do a spacewalk repair, David takes Cliff's replica to Earth and brutally murders Cliff's entire family, which Cliff later discovers. Cliff then comes back to the ship where David is there waiting for him. Beyond the Sea is, for all intents and purposes, pretty predictable. You kind of know where the whole thing is going the minute that Cliff suggests that David use his replica. That's not my biggest issue, though. My biggest issue with this whole episode is that it's slow as all hell. I believe it's on the longer side of all the episodes, and it definitely feels like it. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's beautiful. Every shot has a lot of care put into it, but I feel like there were a few unnecessary scenes that threw the pacing off of the whole experience for me, especially because it's clear where this episode is going by the end. It's not exactly a mystery box style plot that you unpack as you go along. The whole thing feels like it's kind of barreling toward the inevitable, and it's really slow in getting there. What I will say is that if you're going to watch this episode for anyone or anything, watch it for Aaron Paul. He has a tough job here because he kind of has to play two people, but he really excels at both that aspect of things and the fact that his character demands a lot from him emotionally. I don't expect any less from him. I love him in pretty much everything I've seen him in, but yeah, it's one of my favorite performances that I've seen this year, hands down. Also, it's clear by this point that the season starts to take an evolution from technology bad to human nature bad. It's very cynical in its presentation in the sense that the tech is not the bad thing, but rather the tool that is being manipulated by a bad person. And I guess you can argue that this theme is present in most Black Mirror episodes, but to me, this definitely felt like the human conflict was what was meant to be explored more than anything else here. The most interesting parts of it are the dynamics that are explored between Cliff, David, and Cliff's wife, and there's some really intriguing emotions that are pulled out of these characters when you strip the more sci-fi elements away from it all. It felt more like I was watching a really intense character drama than anything else. I also don't really know what the point of the cult subplot was. I feel like they could have just murdered David's family in any way. It didn't necessarily have to be a cult. I felt like that was really jarring and almost going in a different direction. Maybe I just have to give it a second watch to try to understand what the tie-in was there, but to me, it kind of felt out of left field. Like I said, it's a slow burn, so it's definitely not for everyone, and if you're looking for classic Black Mirror, I don't think this is really that. This is probably my second favorite of the bunch though, but it is like a full step under Loch Henry for me. Mazy Day is a bad episode. This is the one that everyone has been shitting on, so I feel more than valid in saying this. The whole thing is really simplistic, there's nothing to really unpack with it, and as a result, I don't have much to say about it. Basically, the plot of this one is that a woman who is part of the paparazzi leaves her career because she feels guilty about a death she caused due to her job, and then goes back into the paparazzi business because she needs money. The rest of the episode follows this photographer as she tracks down the celebrity named Mazy Day, who disappeared after a car accident. The paparazzi find her and discover that she's been hiding away from the public to avoid hurting them, because she is a werewolf. No, seriously. The girl is a werewolf, and that's why she went into hiding, and now she's going to be exposed by all of the people taking pictures of her, but it doesn't matter, because she turns into a fucking werewolf. The one thing I will give this episode credit for is that some of the body horror stuff is interesting when she's, transforming into the monster. That was at least kind of fun to watch. But not only is this a weird jump for Black Mirror, which has never quite ventured so far into the supernatural, but the whole episode is also pretty empty thematically. I mean, the whole overarching theme of the episode is that the paparazzi is bad and that they'll often go to extensive lengths to get photos of celebrities to sell for profit. What could have been interesting is if they actually explored Mazy as more of a real, grounded character, and if they did something more creative with that aspect of things, but they literally just turned her into a werewolf who eats people. And the whole thing is just so fucking dumb. I don't know. It didn't feel like Black Mirror at all. It had little to no redeeming qualities for me. Charlie Brooker, I do not understand how one man can be so inconsistent in his writing from episode to episode. It's actually kind of impressive. Good God. Demon 79 is the last episode in season 6, and I should have been on drugs to watch this one. If you by any chance were on drugs, doesn't matter what kind, and you watched this episode while under the influence, please comment below and let me know that experience for you and how that was, because I'm genuinely very curious. Basically, the plot of this one is that a young woman named Nida works at a shoe store in northern England in 1979 and experiences a lot of racism and general mistreatment from her coworkers and other folks around her. She fantasizes about killing her enemies, which is convenient considering that one day a horrifying demon shows up and tells her that they now have a blood pact and that she has to kill 3 people to prevent the nuclear apocalypse from happening. This episode is fucking nuts. I will also say that it really did not feel like Black Mirror to me. It felt like something entirely different, and there's not really any technology commentary present in any aspect here. If anything, the whole thing is more political in nature. It has a lot of interesting themes about racism and marginalization and power and like the moral ambiguity of killing, which are all really interesting topics to tangle with in a show like this. I don't even know what my opinion is on this yet, to be honest with you, and I know that's going to throw any wrench into any plans that you may think I have for like a ranking of all of the episodes in this season. Right now I don't have one. It felt like it was so wild and out there that I definitely need a second viewing to really figure out if I fuck with it or not. I will say that it's very specified to a visual style and genre, which Black Mirror does do from time to time, and this is very much inspired by like 1970s horror films, and I think they knock the aesthetic out of the fucking park. I mean, the demon literally transforms into Boney M to make Nida more comfortable, and it fucking rocks. I also think that the chemistry between these two is off the charts great. I think because the story here is so bleak and horrifying and weird, you really need some levity, which the demon character definitely brings to the dynamic. I'm not sure what the actor's name is, but he does a fantastic job, and by the end I was like, you know what? I kind of ship these two characters in a bizarre way. And then the episode goes ahead and basically implies that the two of them are endgame in oblivion when they each fail to complete their respective tasks, and the nuclear apocalypse does actually happen, and they go and face eternal nothingness together. Like, what the fuck? Everything about this episode is insane. I know a lot of people online are really loving it, but like I said, I just need more time to sit with it because, again, it really didn't feel like Black Mirror to me at all. But I did enjoy a lot of the parts that weren't very Black Mirror-esque, which is not traditional for my viewing experience with this show. Which almost makes me feel like I'm judging it unfairly or inaccurately, if that makes any sense. It's not very true to the premise of the show, which is often a big critique that I have with a lot of these episodes. But I did enjoy a lot of aspects of it that weren't true to the show, and that usually is not something that aligns for me here. So yeah, love the aesthetics of this one, need a little more time to sit with the other elements of it, and I hope to see these two actors in more things. They were great together, and big props to them for just fully committing to this bonkers fucking concept. I think what Charlie Brooker proved with this season is that yes, the world is becoming much more difficult to parody. So when you're trying to satirize in a show like this, I think one of the easier approaches that he decided to take was to go in a completely opposite direction, in a complete, almost divergent tangent from reality altogether, and make stories that way. Is it Black Mirror as we know it? Not necessarily. Is it bad? Also, no, I think this was, like he said in a couple interviews, a reboot in a lot of ways. It kind of reinvents what we think of Black Mirror to be, and it was definitely successful at that task in more episodes than others, but ultimately, if we do get more of it, I'll watch it. I'm excited to see where it goes next. It's original, it's fun, I had a good time, and I will probably want to watch more of it, maybe on drugs, we'll see. Hello, chiming in with an important end message that if you keep up with me outside of YouTube on any other social media, you should follow my Instagram, because as we're recording this video, my Twitter is suspended for no reason. To my knowledge, I did not violate any kind of terms and conditions or any of Twitter's rules, which at this point are just limited to, like, don't threaten to kill people, which I definitely haven't done. So I got suspended for a bullshit reason. I'm really, really pissed about it. So in the meantime, follow my Instagram while I sort that out. I'll keep everyone updated if I get my account back or I have to make a new account. I really hope I don't have to make a new account. And by any chance, if you work at Twitter, I know no one watching this probably works at Twitter, but if you do, please give me my account back. I'm not above begging. I will beg.